And excellent. Thanks. So thanks, folks. I think I recognize almost everybody here. This is a meeting of the steering committee of the Vermont Climate Council. Jane, go ahead.
I just want to acknowledge that I'm not sure if it's been fixed, but the state website is not working.
I just noticed that.
Yeah. So the public cannot join this meeting. Only if you have an invite on Zoom can you join this meeting. So I think that's okay if we have good notes and minutes, but just want to confirm that that's okay with public process, because this is a publicly warned meeting. Although I saw Matt Coda, I'm not sure if you joined through the website, but
I mean,
sure.
Jane, folks can, if I don't think this was an issue last week, so they could have kind of saved the Zoom invite from the calendar when it was posted. I've only noticed it just 5 minutes ago. So BIC's, they're working on it, but I haven't heard any update on the issue.
I wonder if the thing to do, Jane, is could we just, that same email group that we have that has 95 people on it, whatever, could we just send the Zoom link out to them directly so they don't have to go in to find the Zoom link in the site, or send this link to the agenda, which is working, to that email chain? Hey, Matt.
That would work. I think that would work because I copied the link last week. So I had it in my calendar. So I assume the link is still valid. It's just not on the website now. I think that's the answer.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Thanks, Matt.
But just to be clear, that email, which everybody does, they get a calendar invite already. So they all have those people, because they're all council people or subcommittees. That's who gets that. So
Okay.
it's like, yeah. So it's not going to help sort of the public.
Right, the public at large, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know enough to say for sure. I think if we've posted it properly, it's been working, it happens to be glitched right now, and we're recording the meeting, it feels like we're doing the right things, right, to have this meeting right now. And so I'll just say, from my sense, that's the case, but I will defer to others, particularly those that are more deeply steeped in the public meeting laws, that we're not tripping ourselves up by holding the meeting if the website is providing this glitch right now. Does anybody have a concern with us holding the meeting in this circumstance? Should we go ahead? Okay, great.
Can I just verify that this won't affect, we'll still be able to record the meeting and eventually be able to post the video. So anybody who wants to have viewed and followed the conversation will be able to do that in addition to reviewing the notes.
Yes. Yeah, we are recording literally right now, even this conversation about whether to hold the meeting. And we can post it all once the issue is resolved on the website.
And can I just ask, Jane, when Secretary Clouser told you that Secretary Moore might not be able to attend, did Secretary Clouser say anything about her own attendance?
Yes.
I'm not sure, Julie, if you know, but it was Secretary Clouser's assistant emailed me and said her understanding was Secretary Clouser could be at this one, and she couldn't be at the meeting in September, but she understood Secretary Moore could. So maybe it's just miscommunication. Or
yeah, Kristen and I have traded phone calls all day, but I haven't actually spoken with her.
Okay.
It might just be worth flagging that on our next steering committee agenda, providing a little extra time if needed for public comment, since we won't have been able to have it today, and there might be things from this meeting that people want to comment on.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah, that's frustrating, because these are issues of significant public interest. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think that we were planning to make any decisions today anyway. I think this is kind of a process check-in, but I think it's good to affirm that this will not be a decision-making meeting anyway, given especially this glitch.
Yeah.
and before decisions are made, which are ultimately going to be made by the council anyway, there will be further opportunity for public engagement and input.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jared. Okay, so in that spirit, our agenda for today was to go through the revised governance document, the draft. And that's where we wanted to spend the bulk of our time. There's a specific request at the end around whether to dedicate facilitation resources to Just Transitions meeting. And since you're the steering committee responsible for that, it's your job to help guide the use of those resources. So Kelly's got a request for you there. And there's a space for public comment if we have folks from the public here, and that's it. And we plan to do this 1 hour meeting and dedicate, as much as we can of it to the governance document review. Sound good? Okay, great. So that document went out. It went out as a PDF, and then it was sent out and also posted online as a track change Word document. And two of you had sent through some suggested edits on that track change doc, and I summarized them in my email yesterday, what I thought. And I wanted to start out today's conversation kind of making a punch list of things that you think warrant conversation. And before we dive into the details of it, just like, oh yeah, I want to talk about this, this, and this. And let's make that as a list that we work on together and see how far we can get today. And we'll try to be efficient and bang our way through it, knowing that there's work to be done on this, and we're going to have to do one more round on this conversation. So does that work for folks? If we could just quick shout out the things that we think warrant a conversation amongst all of us. And I'm just pulling up my notes there about those pieces. So if you saw from my my email out, and I'll throw it in the chat right now, these are 4 topics that, at least for 2 of you, were important. One being a description of how we're talking about the role of the council and how much we refer to sort of specific things for this round versus sort of lifting up the gaze a little bit more. The second one is about speaking on behalf of the council, particular focus on a last bullet that was there about sort of which hat you're wearing and how you're doing that, and concerns about that. A third piece was some language around decision-making and how to tighten that up and talk about majority voting. And then the fourth being a specific mention when we talk about addendums in the section around the plan and addendums. And you'll see in the chat there, it's about something that was written that said addendums will only be advanced if the need for them was assessed during that, the writing of that revision of the plan. So those are 4 that came up, and I'd be interested if folks want to add to that list. There's other things you think warrant a conversation, I'd be happy to add to it, and then let's dive into those and see if we can tease out those concerns and how they might be addressed. So for folks who've had a chance to go through the document, are there other things that you'd want to make sure we talk about? Jared?
One thing, I think that list looks good, and I think we'll address the primary concerns and suggestions that I had in terms of language that was added or suggested. I just want to note, and this I think speaks to the process that we're kind of identifying, we're not near a final document to propose. I think this will take probably multiple meetings. But one thing that and this is probably my own technological limitations, but it was easy for me to, in the track change document, see what was being proposed to be added as new language. But whenever I looked at the deleted language, I could only get it to show like the first line, and it was cut off. So I would want another chance to go back and see what was deleted, not just what was added, and make sure that there aren't concerns about what was taken out, not just what is proposed to be added in. I don't know if others had that same challenge with the formatting and how to read the track changes. And that may be my own issue that I just need to figure out, but
Yeah, I think it was a significant amount of track change.
yeah,
that
it was.
caused some clumping up and very hard to understand what was happening there. So, Jared, how about I take that back and figure out if there's a clever way for me to, sometimes you can expand the track change and I can maybe do a version for you like that. But I would love to switch out a track change of like those track changes and into a clean document and then make a new set of track changes as soon as possible. So that the document just starts to get a little bit.
I just want to have eyes on what was actually deleted and make sure that there wasn't that important content may not have accidentally or intentionally been taken out.
Great. Okay. That's great. Are there other pieces of
yeah,
content?
you know, there's a few places where there's just like a word missing, but in some cases it does change the meaning somewhat. So, you know, I don't think they quite count as typos. They're things we probably should all look at and say, oh yeah, there was supposed to be that word there. You know,
Okay.
Yeah, so there are a few of those that we can talk about at the appropriate point when we've dealt with the bigger issues of climate council role and public speaking and all that.
Great. Okay. Let's do that. Let's make sure if there's like some dropped words, like key dropped words, I'll put that in my thing here, key dropped words, and we can go through those. Okay, great. And welcome, Secretary Clauser. All right.
And David Kelly's got a hand up.
I had a couple.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. Thanks. In the section also about speaking on behalf of the council, I had some questions about the second bullet point about what, or sort of what counselors can do. So I had a question there that I wanted to bring up, or sort of question / concern. And also, I wanted to make a note. I don't know. I'm looking at the track change version, and so it's different page numbers, but there was the section about how steering committee members are selected, and the way that it's written right now, which says that people appointed by the House elect the people from the House, people appointed by the Senate elect the people from the Senate. That's not how we did it in 2021. I just wanted to note that. I'm not saying that's a bad way to do it. It's just different from what we did when we first selected members for the steering committee. And I know there was some back and forth, and I just finally went way back and looked at my emails, and I saw that yes, all the legislative appointees voted for 4 people to the steering committee, and it just had to be 2 from each group.
In my recollection,
we all voted for
what we
4.
just did.
Yes, and that's what we just did also. So if we wanted to just continue with the same process, which makes some sense from, you know, one standpoint, I wanted to raise that is not how we did it. And then there was one other thing I had a question about subcommittee membership, just whether or not the subcommittees themselves have any say in their membership. It sounds like the steering committee basically just says, here are your members, and that there wasn't an opportunity for the subcommittees to weigh in. So I was curious if that was intentional or if I'm missing something.
Great. All right. Super.
Thanks.
Anything else on the punch list right now? All right. Why don't we work our way through some of these and see how we get. Let's try to be efficient and not get too bogged down, and just think of it like as a next steps thing. Like, oh yeah, this is why it's concerning. Let's have a quick conversation and then say, okay, David, go do another version, or, oh, Kelly, could you write that up and take a stab at that kind of like next step, if we could do that. I've got actually a clean version on my screen that I was going to share just because it's like a little more stable as a document. And it doesn't have all the track in it, but Jane dropped the track change one, and oops, that's not the right document. Just give me a second. Why don't, while I pull that up, in terms of that point number 1 of the role of the council in the first paragraph, Jared, can you just do the 20-second version of your concern there, and while I pull up that document?
Yeah, sure thing. So this is Sorry, let me just get there. So this is the first paragraph on page 2 of the track changes document, probably page 2 of the clean document as well, under the role of the council. And I think that that first sentence that begins, the GWSA created the Vermont Climate Council, et cetera, that first sentence, totally fine. I think that the content of the paragraph after that first sentence is unnecessary. And the reason I say that is my understanding of what we are trying to accomplish with this document is for it to be kind of relevant on an ongoing basis about how the council operates, how we make decisions, what is our process roadmap, what is our governance. And the rest of that paragraph seems to me to be speaking to a specific point in time between the plans that we are right now. But very soon we're going to have to be, working backwards from submitting the next climate action plan. And just in the interest of this document being more timeless and less time specific, to me, this doesn't feel like a document where this type of language is necessary or appropriate.
Super. Okay, great. And I'm highlighting the language that Jared's referring to. I think I am, yeah. And so the idea there is just when we have language like this that's referring to the current moment in time, that probably best to just take that out and just leave it straight. It's the body charged with creating and updating Vermont's climate action plan.
Yeah.
Okay. Do folks feel strongly about that, or does that seem to resonate with others? How do you feel about that sort of logic and then the specific application of the logic to this place? Any concerns?
I absolutely can't find the raise hand function, so I'm just going to jump in.
Just go for it. We're a small group.
Somehow my screen is now actually bigger than my screen and all the little buttons are gone. I agree with Jared about the third and fourth sentences, but I think those can go. I do think this idea, though, that the focus going forward of the council is on tracking progress and understanding gaps is important context. And so would offer a friendly amendment that I think deleting the second half of that paragraph is appropriate for the reasons Jared indicated, but would ask the second sentence be kept.
That makes sense for folks. Bram, I saw you were trying to jump in. Or no?
How perceptive of you. The one concern I have is that it feels with that second sentence, I agree with Secretary Moore that the third and fourth sentences can go. The second sentence, as written and identifying tracking progress to understand gaps and identify updates to the plan needed to address them, the focus, identifying that as a single focus feels a little limiting to me, simply because the climate is changing in unpredictable ways and at an unpredictable pace, as is the technology and the policy tools available to us. And I would hate for us to restrict ourselves to identifying a gap in a previous plan when some large part of the plan may become superseded by money, technology, climate, policy, etc. I just want to make sure that we are clearly giving the council enough latitude to, in addition to filling in gaps in the previous plan, identify new areas that need to be addressed that were not addressed in the previous plan, rather than simply the gaps, if that is at all coherent.
Yeah, that made sense to me. And I just took a note, if folks are comfortable, of in that sentence adding this sort of phrase about identifying new areas that need to be addressed kind of language.
David, I mean,
yeah,
isn't that language? I want to make sure I'm looking at the any updates to the plan needed. Isn't that what that language says?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Sorry, Jared, go ahead.
I guess I just have a clarifying question here, and it may be just like a difference in semantics or how we're using words. One of the things that I wonder about is, and I don't actually have the statute in front of me, which I always should on these calls, but when we have the responsibility to deliver the next climate action plan, I think some of us see that as not just an update to the existing plan, but a second plan, a new plan. Whereas others might think that that second plan is just kind of revising, adding to, deleting as appropriate the existing plan. And so I think that I would want to, before we finalize this, go back to the statute and mimic that language. You know, does it say that future plans are updates to the first plan, or does it say it is a new plan? So that's one specific way in which I wonder if this language would be limiting, because I don't think we want to be just focused on updating a previous plan. We want to be focused on crafting what the next plan will be, as one example.
That would be great to get that language front and center. Kelly?
Yeah, and yeah, I think nobody wants to start from scratch, and I don't think anyone thinks we need to, but I also I agree. I think we shouldn't limit ourselves to just like, oh, you know, it might need some, there might be some gaps. There might be things that need to be rewritten, sections, whole sections, or new things that we can't foresee coming down the pike. And in that sentence, it's that updates to the plan needed to address them, referring just to gaps. So even if we just said, and any updates to the plan, period, that would help me feel more comfortable with that, saying like, anything we need to do to update it, it's our job to figure out what those things are and do them, whether it's filling in gaps or doing major rewrites or adding, you know, scrapping a section because new data came out that says that, you know, just making things up here, that wind turbines are the worst and we can't use them for some reason, you know. Not that I think that's going to happen, but that's, yeah.
Can I suggest, just on the interest of time on this issue, I think it's an important issue because it gets to your core purpose. The two things I'm taking away is there's concern about just talking about filling gaps feels limited, right? And so addressing that and then trying to use language from the statute that reflects what the mandate is, as well as you create a little bit more expansive language there about the update to the plan. Bram, and then let's try to move on to some of these other ones.
Yeah, you know, just in the interest of having this not be dependent on any particular, this document not be dependent on a particular cycle, perhaps instead of with the initial plan drafted, we would want language about, you know, in between each submission of the plan or something like that.
Right. Yep. Okay, great. Is that good for everyone? It looks, I'm seeing in the chat now, the language in the statute is about updates, so that's great. Okay. Okay. Super. All right, should we move on to the next piece? So the next one is about speaking on behalf of the council. And let me just scroll down to that part. This is a new section, and it's something that's been, you know, a point of sensitivity. And so it's important we spend a little bit of time on this to figure out what lands. I will say the concerns that I heard was this one in particular did not feel good for people. It didn't feel right or make sense. And so two comments I had, both of them just eliminated it. And then Kelly, you had said one of these, I can't remember which one. This bullet here, right, was you had some questions about what that means. No, okay. You can describe what your concern is. Go ahead and Kelly, describe what your concern is.
Thanks. Yeah, I also had concern about that third bullet, but I had seen your notes that people had mentioned that, because I was, you know, thinking, okay, think of myself as an example. So I'm here to represent the small business community. And if I want to reach out to, say, the Chamber of Commerce and hear from other small business owners or people who work for small businesses to find out what they might need, what they'd like to see in updates to the plan, what are their pain points, what do they need help with reducing emissions, I can't say, hi, I'm the small business representative for the Climate Council. I have to say, I'm
Right.
a business owner, and oh, and by the way, I happen to be, it just,
Yeah.
that doesn't make sense to me, that I couldn't have that be my primary hat in that scenario. Or like if a local Rotary Club wanted me to come talk about the work of the Climate Council, that I would have to show up and not be someone there speaking as the small business representative to the Climate Council. And that ties actually back into the first part about what we can do, where it says we can only point to approved written documents that the council has produced. And that also to me feels like I would be stuck if let's go back to the example of a Rotary Club saying, hey, small business representative, come tell us about the work of the Climate Council and what you guys have done. Tell us about the climate action plan. It sounds like all I can do is have them and hand them a handout. Like I can't even summarize it verbally, or I couldn't make my own PowerPoint with the, and I think having a caveat, like this is my summary, personal summary based on my experience of being on the council and my understanding of the plan we put forward. I think that's appropriate, but it sounds like I couldn't even just speak publicly about the work we did, period. This just feels very, very limiting, and it doesn't seem right. I think there needs to be more flexibility, but I also, I also appreciate that it should be really clear that we are speaking as individuals who are members of a council, and that the council has lots of diverse ideas, but there has to be an ability to represent our constituents out in public, and so that we can represent them on the council. Like that just has to happen.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah. Liz, and then Bram, and then Jared. Yeah.
Yeah, that last point was interesting. I hadn't read it. I hadn't read that second point too as exclusive. In other words, I think it's a really good point that we should make sure is clarified, but I had read it as you can do that, not you can't do anything else. But just to the first point you raised, David, I was one of the people who suggested eliminating that third bullet point. And the reason I did so was I think you had said one of your three words was unnecessary or, not needed. That was why I thought it should go, primarily because the most important thing here is that you're speaking on your own behalf. So we could retitle, the title of this is speaking on behalf of the council. The idea here is that individual councils are not empowered to speak on behalf of the entire council. They're just speaking on their own behalf. And that's already captured in the dues. So it feels both clunky and potentially confusing, as Kelly just mentioned, as well as unnecessary to have that third bullet point.
Okay. Thanks, Liz. That's helpful. Bram?
I do think it's important, probably worth a bullet point, making it explicit that when a counselor is talking about the council's work, that counselor says, each time, I am not speaking on behalf of the council. And the subtlety of speaking as a counselor and not speaking on behalf of the council is a little bit tricky to manage in a way that is clear to us as counselors and clear to the people to whom we are speaking. And the last brief thing I would note is that the prohibition against speaking to the council's intent, since all our meetings are recorded and available to the public, there's sort of nothing that we have experienced that a member of the public couldn't also experience. And so it feels as though there's no real danger to public policy or to transparency if we were to say, for instance, when we are speaking to whomever and some passionate young person says, why didn't you ban biomass? What's wrong with you people? As they have said to me, to be able to say, listen, we had a very in-depth and nuanced discussion about it. You can see the meeting. And one of the points of view that was raised, which you can see in the recording, is that the sale of timber to the biomass plant supports landowners keeping forests intact and unfragmented. I think I don't see any danger to the public, and I see active benefit to whoever we're talking to in being able to bring forward that kind of point when we are talking about it, so that the public knows that we have addressed all this stuff, or if we haven't, to say, oh, wow, that's a good point. We didn't talk about that. Again, publicly aware, publicly available that we didn't talk about it for anyone who chooses to review the recordings.
Interesting. And so it raised a question for me. Bram was like, so what is the instruction for us to avoid challenges that, people are speaking on the council's behalf, right? It is very nuanced, as you say. And so what is a good instruction that sort of names that nuance, that allows you to do what you said, which is, if you go back in the recordings, you'll see these kinds of things that were said, right? And you'll see where we landed in this document, right? That seems like entirely great, right? I think it's trickier when people are like, well, the council doesn't think, right? Or the council thinks something or other. Like that sounds like going over the other side, right? So.
Yeah, and that's pretty clear to me. If someone does that, it feels as though they are taking inappropriate license to speak on behalf of the council. And, I would hope that we include an explicit direction to state explicitly that I am not speaking on behalf of the council, and would hope that that would be a reminder to the person speaking as well, not to say, the council really doesn't like, ethanol or whatever that person may be saying.
Right.
Like, hopefully it'll be a reminder to the person not to make representations like that.
Right. Thanks, Bram. Jared?
Yeah, broadly, I think one of the parts of this section that I agree with and appreciate is the distinction about the council as a whole, or the entire council, versus an individual councilor. But I think that there is this third level of nuance that is, even though none of us can speak to the intent or the beliefs or opinions of all other 22 councilors, there are, as that second bullet point says in the they can section, there are approved written documents and decisions that we've made, the climate action plan, decisions that were made in minutes. So one thing I might do is, just to better tie the can and cannot sections together, and I suggested this in a track change format, is after those two cannot ones, tie it back to the first to say, except where there are approved decisions or written documents that the council has produced. I would be asked, what does the climate action plan say about this? There is something very specific to point to, or what decision was made in a subcommittee meeting that you were a part of. I should be able to speak to that. I shouldn't say that I am, and I never have, and I don't know of anybody else who has, say that I'm representing everybody on the council or the council in its entirety. So that's one point. The other point, I would just add my agreement to what Kelly and Liz said in deleting that third bullet point under they cannot. And Kelly brings up great practical points, as have others, about why that doesn't really work for councilors or the council. I would also just, take a step back to say that I am not aware of any precedent for telling a public appointee that they cannot speak in their publicly appointed capacity. So it feels not only impractical, but inappropriate. So that's another reason.
Yeah. So on this topic, I think what I'm hearing is maybe there's a merging of the can and cannots some way. Maybe it's about naming that nuance and really leaning into not speaking on behalf of the entire council, right? And what that looks like in practice is you say that, right? You say, I'm not speaking on the entire council. and you can point to things, I don't know, I can work on it, but I've taken a bunch of notes. Kelly, do you want to help find a pathway
Yeah, I was
forward on
thinking
this?
more like even just having like you should for the you can, because what I read was you can only do these
I
things,
think,
whereas
yes.
it's the word is only isn't there, but as Liz said, she didn't read it that way, but I was sort of like, wow, okay, this is very limiting, because I read it as you can only, whereas should and certain things have different levels of importance in this. So yes, there's a lot of nuance, and I think merging them a little bit and trying to balance that nuance is good. I think that would be helpful.
With actual, maybe some example language, right? In the document, like this is what we mean when we say that. Okay. Do we capture what needs to be said on that? And I'm happy to take another whack at that. If anybody wants to help me with that, I'd welcome that. All right. Okay. Should we go to the next thing? Decision-making language. Here I can pull up, if you want, Liz, you had suggested some language. I'm just going to jump down to this. We can jump back up to the piece. The specific language that got flagged, and Liz, I'll just mention it was you, was in here, like the lead up to the sort of practicalities of what's going to happen next kind of thing. Like consensus building is all great and decisions need to be made. And I think what I took away from your edits, Liz, was put in this introduction, something that's just clear, like, and decisions need to be made. The council is empowered through its statute to, do majority voting, right? And here is a pathway for, this is how we're going to be managing information as it comes in that needs to be decided on. Something along those lines. Liz, am I doing a good job summarizing your suggestions there?
Yeah, I mean, seeing the red lines would be helpful, but we don't have to do it now if that's not the process now. But yeah, no, I just felt like we weren't, if this is a process document, it should ultimately clarify and be helpful, not make questions easy down the road, right? And this just felt like even the phrasing, right? Does not have unlimited time. Well, just be clear that after working to discuss and achieve consensus, we'll then move to vote. Not have a vote, but move to vote. And hopefully the votes will be easy because consensus has been built, but that will be the process.
Right. Yeah. And state that the GWSA states the council can make decisions by majority vote, which I don't think is in the version I sent, which needs to be in there for sure. Okay. Do others feel like that would be a helpful addition to that? Yeah. Any concerns about it? Okay, great. All right.
Kelly, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you looked like you were thinking about it. I just want to see if we can pause to see if you had.
Just say, Kelly. The one thing I was wondering is whether it seems like the consensus is really helpful for certain decisions, but then for certain really important, like really critical decisions, doing a vote is probably a good thing. But we've often been able to have consensus on what Liz was saying kind of made it sound like we would always just move to a vote at the very last thing, whereas having consensus to move forward on certain smaller items seems fine and like it's worked well. But
yeah,
I guess
fair. I was limiting it to policy, whatever it says in that paragraph. You're right. It should be.
Okay, that was the only thing.
Yeah.
I think we hem and haw about whether we should have a vote or not, and it starts to get a little bit messy and take up more time than necessary. I found this section really helpful. I liked the outline of the different steps. I think that's going to be helpful for us going forward.
Super. Thanks. Okay. All right. I'll pull in Liz's language in the basis of, and Kelly with your make sure that we're not tripping up what you're saying there, Kelly, as well. All right. The plan and addendum section. just give me 1 second here. This is again, a new section because we didn't really contemplate addendums when we did this document 3 years ago. So this was written in, and it was flagged by one of you, this particular phrase here. And I'm sure there's some intent behind this phrase, and I think it's about, I'll turn it over to Julie or others who have some thoughts about this, but it's about trying to signal that the emphasis is updating a plan, and we don't want to get distracted with a lot of addendums when the council really should be focusing on updating the plan. Jared, you flagged some concerns about that. But Julie, let me turn it over to you first to talk a little bit about the thinking behind that phrase.
Yeah, sure. I think it really comes down to, and we've struggled a bit with this internally, is the public process around addendums. Obviously, we place a great emphasis on public engagement around as we were drafting the plan and adopting it. And then the addendums have received much the opportunities for broad public engagement, where we're proactively going out to the public to talk about these, have not risen nearly to the same level of effort. And I think we've got to be really thoughtful about adding content to a plan where the plan itself is made available for a broad public process and addendums aren't. And to my mind, this strikes that balance where addendums that are noted in the plan. So hopefully, as we're communicating to folks what is contained in the plan, we can also indicate what may need to continue to have work done on it post-adoption. But absent that, I feel like we run the real risk of falling short on some of the public engagement elements that are laid out in the Global Warming Solutions Act.
Okay. Thanks, Julie, for that clarification. Kelly, and then Jared.
Yeah, I definitely agree that we should not, we should be limiting what we're doing in between working on plans. But I think with the fact that everything changes very quickly and natural disasters pop up that may bring to light things we didn't consider in our first plan. We have 4 years between these. And I was thinking, like, what if TCI had fallen apart after we had finalized that draft, that first plan? Then we would have this big gap. But we didn't know we had a gap because we thought TCIP was a sure thing. This would mean that we couldn't do the deep dive into transportation for that addendum if we don't have some provision for, like, barring unforeseen circumstances that warrant an addendum in between drafts. That would be the one thing I would add, because I do think it is very likely that something will crop up and we don't want to be like, sorry, we can't work on it because we said we couldn't work on it. Sorry, we didn't know that there was going to be, a meteor that wiped out half the state, but it's not. The process document says we can't do a new addendum, I just want a little bit of a caveat there.
Right. Thanks, Kelly. And I think one thing, just quick before I go to Jared, the issue, right, is how quickly you produce something, right? Because you could work on it for the next version of the plan. But what you're saying is it's so urgent and unforeseen, or so that you want to do something before then. That's what you're talking about. Okay. Yeah. Jared.
Yeah, I guess I would just say that as I heard what Julie was expressing, I very much agree with the kind of hope and intent that, there's these seasons to the council work, right? In terms of, like, working on the plan and the update to the plan, and then having an in-between time that's primarily focused on implementation and research and not just, a long list of addenda. I also agree with the point that any kind of substantive, either the plan itself or updates or addenda to the plan, it's important that there's good, robust public process about that. With that said, I do share Kelly's concerns, and I think that it's it's how strict and limiting this language is will only be advanced if the need for them is addressed in the preceding plan. And to me, that suggests that we need something that doesn't exist, which is perfect foresight about what is going to happen with current events or policies. Or I think the TCI example is a really good one. And to me, it's not just that there may be an urgent issue that comes up that the plan may need to speak to, or recommendations in the plan may need to speak to. It's also that, you know, we may get better data that makes it clear that we're not on track to meet a certain legal obligation, and therefore an additional recommendation may need to come forward. Like, you know, and I think that TCI example is a great one. What if that had happened 2 weeks after the plan had been adopted rather than 2 weeks before? Would we say we don't have the opportunity to address the kind of partial gap that emerges in the transportation space? So I would just suggest, you know, making that providing a little bit more nuance and flexibility there. You know, the language I suggested was just adding to the end of that sentence something like, unless an additional and affirmative council vote identifies the need for an addendum. You know, that's a pretty high bar in terms of getting, you know, a majority of the council to agree that a new addendum should be, you know, identified and advanced. I just want to make sure that we're not closing off doors without thinking about the potential implications, especially with regards into ways we cannot see into the future.
Thanks, Jared. Yeah. Kristen?
So I wonder if there's a hybrid solution there. Again, using the TCI recommendation, maybe you could include both a vote, right? If there are unforeseen circumstances or unanticipated circumstances that significantly impact an existing plan recommendation, and the council votes to propose an addendum or work on an addendum, right? So you're kind of combining those two, but then also, you know, understanding and sharing Julie's concern about wanting to make sure we're actually doing, right, concentrating on the work too, and updating as required in the Global Warming Solutions Act. Maybe there's a hybrid solution there that would allow addendums if some of the, but making those unforeseen circumstances really significant and also impacting an existing recommendation in the plan. So it's not just, you know, unforeseen circumstances, but it actually significantly impacts a recommendation and we vote on it.
Great. So what if we take a stab at putting language in that uses words like unforeseen circumstance, significantly impact the plan or a plan recommendation, and a council, you know, in those circumstances can vote to do something in a faster timeline than the next revision? Would that be good if we try to put some language like that in there? Okay, great. Let me try to do that. So
I'm sorry, David, can I just add one quick thought?
Yeah.
Which is, if we could also find the proper language to address, you know, unforeseen circumstances which affect a recommendation. It just feels like there may be some unforeseen circumstances which provide a new opportunity. They don't negatively impact something we've said, but they provide something a tool we didn't have before, or something that we could fix. You know, I'm thinking some great new technology or some such. So some way to allow us to take advantage of new opportunities as well as new challenge, as well as address new challenges, I think would be helpful.
great. So let me try to see if I can like some language that does that maybe it talks about, you know, the plan and its implementation, something. So if something comes along and completely changes the plan implementation because of a new opportunity, like what you're saying, Bram, that would fall into that bucket. Okay, I'll try some words on that and you all can take a look at that. I want to take a pause here because we're getting towards the end. Kelly, can you do your quick request of, and let me just say, actually, because we're going to come to the end. The next things on my list are key dropped words that you had mentioned, Bram. And might I suggest, Bram, that you send those along, and we'll and I'll throw those in, then we can look at those. There is the section about electing steering committee members that is different than what we did, which Jared, you had flagged, and Kelly, you had flagged. And so any concern about going back to what we've done, does that work fine? So take that back to where we're from, what we've been doing. Okay. And then subcommittee memberships, do subcommittees have any say in their membership? Let's look at that. And I think, Kelly, you had mentioned that. Kelly, take a look at that and see if you can send me a line or something that would address that concern, right? Because it does make sense, particularly subcommittee co-chairs, So with that, why don't I take a stab with help from anybody who wants to help me to make some of those edits. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to accept all the edits from before, right? And then I'm going to work on top of those. And we will still have the old version. So Jared, you and others can look at, see what was dropped and everything. But I just want to make a clean version and then put on the edits from this meeting onto that clean version.
As long as we have both, that's great.
Yeah, definitely. Bram, final thoughts before we wrap this piece up about the governance doc?
Yeah, super quick. We were on the subject of subcommittee membership, and while we have the steering committee and Matt here, I just want to remind us all that we do have an empty seat on the council representing the fuel sector, and I think it is important that we fill that soon.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Bram. Okay, Jared.
I guess I just have two questions. One is about what Jane put in the chat. And I'm wondering, Jane, I don't actually recall from that meeting, was that a suggestion that one counselor made, or was that the sense of the council that we agreed on? Because if it was the latter, then we should stick with the language as is. I brought it up not because I had a concern about the way that it was drafted in terms of how we select the legislative appointees for the steering council committee, but just because it was obvious that it didn't match with what we had done previously. So if you can just speak to that.
Or could we send an email about it?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Could we send an email about it? Yeah.
We
Yeah,
could
and
just
then-
check the council minutes.
Yeah.
To be clear.
And
Well,
then
we'll-
lastly, really quickly, I would just say that my sense of the practice for subcommittee membership is what it's been, and what I think we want to reflect better here in line with what Kelly's suggesting is that subcommittees have a role in nominating and putting forward members for their subcommittee, but that approval happens at the steering committee level. I don't think we want something that suggests that all happens through the steering committee, because that's not how it's happened. We want the input and nominations to come through and be vetted by that subcommittee, but there's that kind of extra step of approval by the steering committee because of the concerns around balance and, et cetera. So if we can just kind of reflect what we've done a little more clearly, hopefully that would work.
Well, great. Okay. And so we can take this back and make some edits and then put it back up for review. And we can do another round on this in our next meeting. We can't edit in real time with all of you because that's considered a public meeting. So we have to do this little sort of back and forth thing and do it in a public space. Great. So the pending items or any public comment in this meeting in Kelly's request. Kelly, can you do your request real quick, and then I'll test if we have any comment.
Yes. So the Just Transition Subcommittee is hoping to hold an in-person meeting at the beginning of September. And at this meeting, we'd love to accomplish a couple things. One, just build some more rapport in person, face-to-face, because that's so much easier for a lot of people. But we also want to have a concerted discussion about two things that are important: how we can help the council and other subcommittees actually implement and really deeply use the Just Transitions Guiding Principles and rubric. And also how we can help make sure that our public engagement, especially public comment and things like that, are done in a way that helps our members of the public feel more heard, and that we can make sure people understand that their voices are being heard and it's being incorporated, because it's happening, but people aren't feeling heard all the time. So we wanted to have some conversations around those things, and I think it would be really helpful if we could have some facilitation from someone who's not on the subcommittee. So we were hoping that if David was available and the steering committee or whoever needs to approve that for the contract, that he could help us and come there. If that doesn't work, we were hoping that maybe Indra or someone else could come and facilitate. But we need to get approval from the steering committee, I think, before we can do that.
That's right. And Indra's part of the CBI contract now. So either Indra or myself could do that. And it's just this, you all as a steering committee need to provide some guidance about how facilitation is being used across different subcommittees. And there's not a lot of subcommittee activity right now, so it's not a big deal, but this is the thing going forward. Jane, do you want to mention more about that?
Yeah, I'm not sure how much time we've spent on that with all of you, but I do just want to reflect that that was a very intentional write-in to the contract with CBI to ensure that that was prioritized thoughtfully and not just used as subcommittees wanted, that we put in that with coordination with A&R, who manages that contract, the steering committee would prioritize the use of those limited resources.
So there's a specific decision point, which is any concerns about using some facilitation resources to support that meeting in September. I think it raises a question for each of you of like, wait, how many resources, like how many hours are there? So we didn't come prepared to say, oh, by the way, there's X number of hours dedicated to subcommittees. We don't really have that laid out for you right now, but I think that's a fair ask for you all to say of like, well, hang on, how much is this? But for right now, the question is it okay to tap into CBI's time to help with this meeting?
For my part, I would say Just Transitions is as important as anything else and more complicated than a lot of things. And it's absolutely a place that I would prioritize the limited CBI hours we have.
Great. Thanks, Bram. Jared?
I agree with Bram, and especially given the context of, a lot of them haven't been meeting. This is early, but I do think that it would be good going forward that when we have these decisions to make, it would be helpful context. And it doesn't sound like it's really relevant right now, but the next time in future times, having a sense of how many hours have been used, how much is left, what are other requests that we may or may not be aware of. But for now, that sounds great.
Thanks, Jared. Absolutely fair. Great. Okay, I think that's it. So no concerns about that? Okay, seeing no concerns, I assume then everyone's okay with it. All right. I want to create a space for public comment. If folks who have been listening in who would like to comment on what we've been talking about, this is a chance to do that. So I encourage you to, if you'd like to do that, feel free, please. Matt, you're kind of here. Ryan and Billy are here too.
Can I just very quickly, Matt Coda, Meadow Hill Consulting, second Bram's recommendation that the fuel dealer position be filled on the Climate Council. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
If it's okay, I would just clarify the difference between the subcommittee nominations and the council nominations, and that the council nominations have to go through the appropriate legislative appointing authority. I don't know who has had conversations with appointing authorities. I imagine that this is more complicated to do in the summer months or in the off session than it is during the session. Or maybe not for the opposite reason. but
Right. And fundamentally it rests in the legislative bodies to appoint the counselors. Yeah. Great. Anything else, folks, before we round up and finish up? Okay. So I've got notes on the conversations we took about each of those items. We'll make a new version of that. We will send that around. And when we send it around, we also publicly post it and all that good stuff. If folks have ideas, feel free to send them. I have like track change ideas already from Jared and Liz, and I can pull from those as I make these adjustments. If there's other ideas you have, like Bram, in your words, please send those along. If you want to, like Bram, accept all the other edits and just add yours so I can see what you're doing, that's almost easier. So it's not so hard to see, like literally see what you're suggesting. Jane, then Jared, then we'll finish up.
Sorry, I just want to clarify process. So the last time the steering committee met, you empowered A&R to support the drafting of a revision to the process roadmap. And so just to be clear, A&R took the lead on this point to this point. I'm sort of hearing a transition at this point that we're asking of resources from CBI to sort of carry through these nuanced conversations, which feels fine with me, but just want to clarify that the onus on this was A&R really had done it to this point, and we were happy to hand it over to CBI to facilitate the nuanced language going forward.
Thanks, Jane. Jared?
Yeah, I just want to note one thing, that there were in the track changes that I sent, there were a number of things that I weren't kind of rising to the substantive level that we discussed in this call, but that were more minor in terms of clarifying language or things that I thought, might be slightly more appropriate. So hoping that those can be incorporated, because they don't seem like big decision or substantive points. And I think it would be helpful, again, just to reiterate that any changes made, we continue to have a track changes version and a clean version, understanding that it is helpful to have a clean version to reference given how many changes have been made. But I will commit to going back and looking at to really fully understand the deleted sections. And if there was anything where I was suggesting alternate language, I'm happy to check in with you, David, or others. It's helpful for the process moving forward.
Thanks, Jared. I just realized I was sharing my screen the whole time. Sorry about that. What you can expect from me is I'm actually going to use the version that I was just sharing, which is it's accepting all the track changes that are in the version online right now, posted on the meeting website, accepting all those. And I'm going to work from that and put changes in, including changes like Jared that you would suggest in track change, or Liz, and then everything we talked about in this meeting. So I'm going to start from fresh, right, with tracks, but I'll start from now forward. You'll be able to see the track change, and you have that other version which doesn't go away. It'll still be there, so you can reference. Is that right?
Yeah. So for that next one, there will be a clean one from accepted, but then you'll also track those, but it would only show the new tracks. Got it.
That's what I'm going for. New tracks.
Yeah.
Fresh tracks.
Got it. Good.
And
Thank you.
David, can you send the clean version in Word? I think I only have it as a PDF, and then I can also track changes when I add words and send that to you.
And I'll tell you how I made it as well. I took the one that's posted on the meeting website, or it was just in the chat, and I accepted everything. That's all I did. So if you want to do that, you can do it.
I'd like to, can I share the clean version that I have? Because I did that with the track change version, but then there were still grammatical changes and like nothing substantive, but I cleaned it up a very little bit since then. So
nice.
I'll share with you the Word document that I have, because that would be a better starting place than the Word document from the track change version.
That's great. Thanks.
Thanks, Jane, for sending that around. Appreciate that. All right, folks, we ran a little bit over, but thanks. Last things, anything? We have a meeting on the books, right? Our next meeting? Somebody knows it?
September.
August 28th.
Monday, yeah, 8:30 to 10
Oh.
a.m.
Are you gonna,
I
you're gonna be
forgot
on
that we
vacation?
bumped the July
I
meeting
may-
to August.
Yeah,
I may not be able to attend. I'll be driving. I may be able to call in from the car,
okay.
just FYI.
August 28th. If folks know they're not going to be available for vacation reasons, please send me and Jane an email so we just figure out if we have a quorum problem. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good
Thanks.
afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.